All right, follow-up question. Ask the pool guy on the video, what does the fireman switch turn off on a swimming pool heater? So the question is, thank you for this. I've never understood how the fireman switch gets wired. So it's the only low voltage control to the pool heater, question mark. What if there is no low voltage wiring for the heater?
There always is. Okay. So in the new age of electronic ignition heaters, you have a high voltage half of the heater that's power coming in, controlling your board, but it's always step down voltage when it goes through all of the checks and balances, when it goes through the flame rollout switches, and there's not so much flame rollout in electronic ignition, but there's limiter switches, high limit switches, redundant high limit switches, pressure switches, fusible links, which is kind of the same thing as a rollout switch. There's all these things. That's a whole low voltage system. Well, in that loop, in every heater, there's either a wire that you're supposed to snip if you're adding in a controller or adding in a timer, or there's a 2-wire with a wire loop that you would take that wire loop out and run your 2 feeds in there. And all of fireman switch does on a normal timer is that as the timer is turning, if the high voltage of the timer is turning to turn your pump on or off, when it gets 15 minutes to 20 minutes before it's time to shut the pump off, it opens a little switch that opens up that circuit, those 2 wires that go down into the low voltage of your heater. And what that does is that signals and indicates for the gas valve to shut off so that it no longer produces gas, no longer produces flame. And what it does is it shuts off the heater 20 minutes before it shuts the pump off. Now, in most of today's day and age, we have most pools, and all pools are required to have electronic ignition today, but there's an awful lot of pools out there that still have standing pilots, old heaters that still work. But new heaters today, typically, when the pump shuts off, the heater senses the flow, shuts the flow switch off, which shuts the gas valve off, but the heater stays on and it exhausts the heat out of the vent. So we kind of have 2 different things going on here, but that fireman switch is just part of a low voltage system that every single pool heater has out there. They have a low voltage system. It's just that now they have a high voltage part of the heater as well. So there's 2 different things going on, and it's just a high voltage coming in, being stepped down to low voltage and running through that loop of checks and balances. And so today, the fireman switch is less applicable because that really is needed. Although I'll tell you,
it's still important, I guess, if you're replacing a system.
Although it's still important, I look at like my system at home. I have an electronic ignition Ray Pack heater, but it's not forced. It doesn't have a blower. It doesn't have a separate blower. So while it's electronic ignition, it still needs to shut off 20 minutes before the pump does. Because if the pump shuts off, the heater shuts off, but this heater, we have the same problem. The heater is hot inside and wants to boil the water and damage the heater. Whereas at your house, you have something that has a separate blower. So if the water shuts off, the heater shuts off, that blower stays on by plan to cool the inside of the heater out. So like in the case at my house, it's important for me to have a fireman switch. In the case of your house, it's not important to have a fireman switch because the heater knows how to cool itself off. My heater doesn't know how to cool itself off. You just turn your pump off and that heater shuts off, but it's still 600 degrees at the core and it doesn't know what to do with that other than boil all the water and all of the plumbing.
Okay,
So there
you go.